If you have not watched Code Geass, please be aware that this video will contain huge spoilers regarding the anime. You have been warned. As we all know, Code Geass Season 3 was announced and Lelouch is now pretty much confirmed to be alive. When R2 ended, it felt as though it was a conclusion to the final chapter. The book was shut and with it, Lelouch was presumed dead. Many of us didn't want to believe it, and some of us did. Lelouch's death seemed poetic in many ways. Most of us even poured endless tears during that final moment of what was left of Code Geass. As we mentioned in our 10 things you didn't know about Code Geass, the producers actually meant to end the series with a bittersweet ending and had the intention of having Lelouch die. They wanted to make this death canon but left the ending open to interpretation. For some fans in the anime community, the introduction of a new season seems to be a bad idea and just another type of money grab cash cow, but I don't like to think that. Let's assume the best. Even if this could possibly be the case, in this video we are going to cover how the reintroduction of Lelouch in Season 3 is not a plot hole, but instead is just a continued story. So firstly, let's quickly recap how Code Geass ended. Now, the ending of R2 was probably one of the greatest conclusions to a story, where it left us in a complete mess. It was truly the definition of bittersweet. After defeating Charles and Marianne's plot in creating a new world, Lelouch orchestrated a plan with the assistance of Suzaku and possibly C2 to end all war and to usher the world in an age of peace. This plan was called Zero Requiem. Lelouch took the role of the oppressive dictator while secretly schemed an incredible martyrdom where he would be the focal of all hate, ultimately forcing the alliance of the United Federations of Nations and the Black Knights. He later had Suzaku, disguised as Zero, to publicly take his life. The plan was to direct all hatred of the world onto him, and Lelouch's death would serve to facilitate peace. The talks of Lelouch's survival was first introduced because of the final scene of Code Geass where Cece, or C2 or whatever you like to call her, is seen laying down in a cart full of hay talking out loud. Quoting her, she says, "I said the power of kings, known as Geass, brings one solitude." Not quite accurate, is it? Right, Lelouch? Cece then tilts her head towards the driver of the cart, giving the impression she was talking to the driver, giving us, the audience, the possible belief that Lelouch is driving the cart. There was also a rumor going around that the original Japanese ending of Code Geass, it shows the cart driver smiling after C2 makes a speech. The shape of his face and hairstyle look exactly like Lelouch, and the fact that he smiles at what C2 says is pretty much tips it off. Another tip-off point is the paper crane laying on the hay near C2. It is the same type of crane Nunnaly taught Lelouch on how to make, so either Lelouch himself made it or he taught C2 on how to make it. Okay, that's well and good, anime balls deep, but how does that explain Lelouch surviving the stab wound given to him by Suzaku?
How, Sway? You ain't got the answers, man!
Well, that's because Lelouch is immortal after obtaining the code. Before I continue to explain of how Lelouch obtained the code and become immortal, let's refresh on what we know about the code and Geass. We know that the Geass grants the beholder the power to fulfill their inner desires by absolute control over certain influence, either by thought, memory, perception, and even the will and desire. The power varies, so it's not limited by that. A person acquires Geass by taking a contract with an immortal code bearer who wants themselves possess Geass. In Lelouch's case, he was given his Geass by C2. C2 was given her Geass, which made people fall in love with her, from an unnamed nun. Charles was given his Geass by V2. Geass cannot be used on code bearers as they are immune to it. However, once the Geass becomes mature enough and is active on both eyes, it becomes strong enough to kill a code bearer, consequently transferring their code onto the Geass user. We all know that the code doesn't have to be given or received willingly. The nun who gave C2 the Geass powers forced her to take the code, and in the second season when V2 is seen fatally wounded, he says Charles stole his code. In terms of what the code bearer gains from observations we see, it's the ability to create contracts with others to grant Geass, its immunity to Geass, immortality, and also the ability to transfer memories. And then there's another power we only see once in the first season and is used by C2 at the Battle of Naruto, where CC feeds Suzaku shock images to immobilize him. To fully activate the code and its immortality, the inheritor of the code has to experience death, as the code activates only when the Geass user dies. C2 seemed to be wounded when she killed the nun and died. Charles was shot and died. When the code is fully activated, the one who obtains it seems to lose their Geass powers. We see this happen with C2 in her flashbacks, as after obtaining code, she had to lose her Geass. Likewise with Charles, when Lelouch killed him for the first time with the Geass, Charles shot himself in the heart and became immortal, but before his code activated, he was still able to use his Geass of absolute order, even after obtaining V2's code. In both cases shown, the immortal who was killed was also the code bearer who gave their killer the Geass, making it hard to tell which event actually caused the Geass user to lose their Geass or their powers. It could either be the activation of code or the death of the code bearer who held the contract for the Geass. Though the former is more true, given that Charles and even Rollo's Geass remained active after V2's death, for example, so their contract was still valid. When we look at these contracts, we must think of code as the giver rather than the code bearer. The Geass is contracted by the code and not the immortal who possesses the code. So to simplify it, using Rollo's case for example, when V2 died, Charles inherited his code. Rollo's Geass is still active because V2's code is still active but just with another user. So does this mean a person cannot possess code and Geass at the same time? Well, not exactly. According to the theory of contracts, we established that a Geass contracted by a code cannot belong to the same user at the same time, as once you activate the code you become the code becomes you, and you cannot be contracted to yourself. So code A and its contracted Geass A1 cannot be owned by the same person. However, this doesn't mean that the person with Geass A1 cannot possess code B. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say is that it would have been possible for Charles to keep his Geass if he took C2's code instead of V2's code. Okay, so now we go back to Lelouch. We see Lelouch killing Charles for the second time in the thought elevator with Geass on both his eyes. So remember, our man Lelouch has the ability to kill his father and take his code. The theory dictates that at this point he inherited the code, but is not fully activated yet. And if the theory of contract is true, after activating the code, Lelouch should still possess his Geass because he did not obtain C2's code and his Geass falls underneath her code contract. This gives the conclusion that after Lelouch's death, he activates V2's code and becomes immortal. At the same time, he possesses C2's contract, which is the Geass, so he now has code and Geass. Lelouch has code Geass. You get it? Another thing to note about code bearers is that when they inherit the code, they also receive the code mark. People have assumed that Lelouch's code mark is on his neck where his father grabbed him, and apparently they didn't show his neck again after that scene. A couple of other possible pieces of evidence is that the flashback images Nunnaly sees after touching Lelouch, either Nunnaly has some power of her own, or Lelouch's code allowed him to share his memories similar to how C2 did with Lelouch. Another thing to point out is usually people who had the code were called CC and VV, C2 and V2. So when you get the code, your name is either just becomes your initials or it takes the first letter of your name and add the 2 at the end as a representation of your second life. Code Geass Season 2 is called R2. Most people think it means Second Rebellion, but what if it had another meaning, like a double entendre? I don't know, maybe Lelouch Lamperouge. In Japanese you pronounce the L as an R, so his name would actually be Lelouch Lamperouge. The initials spell RR, which is R2, and I definitely messed up those pronunciation errors, forgive me. Now, you may be thinking then, Why did the producers say that Lelouch's death is canon? Well, because it is. All in all, it means that Lelouch did die, but he's not dead, because his code that he got from his father activated, resurrecting him and made him immortal. But Lelouch from the point became R2 and is no longer Lelouch. Do you understand? I don't know. But hey guys, this is just a theory, and we will find out if Lelouch really has the code and the Geass in the coming season. Is he even alive, or is he a memory? What's going on? Let us know what you think in the comment section below. If you guys like this video, make sure you smash that like button, and if you want more theories, put that anime in the freaking comment section below and let us know. Subscribe, check out our second channel which we have if you want to, and subscribe there as well, and we'll see you guys next time. As always, thanks for watching, and follow our social medias.